there is a notable disparity between the number of people interested in horror video games and those invested in world RPGs and sports games. This discrepancy is comprehensible given the fast-paced nature of contemporary society. Indulging in a video game that induces fear and horror may be the last thing one desires. Nonetheless, for those who are bold enough to traverse the eerie terrain, there exist exceptional horror video games that can keep players awake throughout the night. Although Halloween is past, it is worth noting that certain horror games should not be played alone or by the faint-hearted. These games have the potential to trigger alarming mental images and heart-stopping moments, so beware. Here, we provide a list of the top 10 horror games that one should refrain from playing in the dark. 10. Outlast 2. Outlast 2, the successor to the original Outlast horror video game that was launched in 2013, has been released for Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, PS4, and PC gamers. The game's plot immerses you in the unfolding events overseen by Sullivan Noth and his loyal followers. Similar to its predecessor, Outlast 2 is played in first-person perspective and is designed to be more intricate and fear-inducing. As the protagonist, you are cast in the role of a journalist who survives a helicopter crash and finds themselves stranded in a remote region of Arizona. Your mission, together with your spouse, Lynn, is to explore and uncover stories that no other journalist would dare touch. However, there is no option for combat or self-defense. You must solely rely on running and hiding to gather the pieces of the puzzle. The desert in Arizona is enveloped in profound obscurity, and nobody is willing to shine a light on it. The level of corruption is alarmingly high, but you are tasked with exposing it. Outlast 2 has a slow start, but do not be deceived. It is not only frightening but also requires a steady heart and stomach. 9. The Madness of Death. In the realm of video games, there exists an enigmatic and chilling creation known as the Madness of Death. This game is not meant for the general populace, as it is reserved only for those who have been chosen. Despite its relatively short duration of only 30 to 60 minutes, it offers players an unparalleled experience, replete with unparalleled gameplay, immersive storytelling, and intense psychological horror. The narrative centers around a man who has suffered the tragic loss of his wife, leading him to withdraw from society and indulge in ancient tales that explore the possibility of resurrecting the dead. After a fortnight has passed, his sister receives a mysterious letter beckoning her to visit her estranged brother. Her search leads her to a box containing enigmatic symbols that baffle her. Meanwhile, the man stumbles upon a stone that plunges him into a seemingly inescapable nightmare. It should be noted that the game comes with a warning, advising players to use discretion, particularly if they are easily disturbed. 8. Until Dawn. From the domain of survival and action-adventure, Until Dawn, a game of RPG genre, boasts an assortment of elements. The game revolves around 8 adolescents who are confined to a mountain and have no alternative but to seek refuge in a single cabin. They find themselves besieged by fear, and as time passes, the tension and apprehension intensify. However, they must survive or perish. Until Dawn grants you the privilege of assuming the role of any of the 8 characters and taking part in the spine-chilling adventure. You will have to make crucial decisions, and each choice will come with its repercussions. Your decisions will determine whether your team survives or succumbs to death. The game incorporates the butterfly effect, which guarantees branching storylines, further solidifying the element of unpredictability. The game's dynamism and unpredictability, accompanied by the presence of celebrated TV stars such as Hayden Panettiere, make it an attractive prospect to horror enthusiasts, but strictly not in dim lighting. The game was originally designed for PS3, but it is now available for PS4, and it has recently undergone a transformation to adapt to PCs and desktops. 7. The Last of Us. The curious paradox of this spine-chilling video game lies in its achievement of over 200 Game of the Year awards despite its unsettling nature. Once played, the characters' actions and events linger in the player's thoughts and affect their subconscious. The game follows Joel and Ellie, 2 characters forced to survive together in a hostile post-pandemic environment, where they must collaborate to endure what remains of their shattered world. The Last of Us is an extremely brutal game that requires players to engage in combat and strategically shoot enemies. The game's content contains scenes of torture and animal deaths, and it may not be suitable for individuals with strong moral convictions. It's a game that is best played in broad daylight and not for the faint of heart. The game is available on both personal computers and consoles, with a new iteration compatible with the next-gen PS5. 6. Murder House. As an AI language model, I am familiar with the concepts of perplexity and burstiness in written content. However, in order to meet your specifications and ensure that the rewritten article is not overly uniform in sentence length, nor too complex in its use of vocabulary, I will utilize a combination of phrasing techniques and vocabulary choices to create a reimagined version of the original text. If you happen to have a predisposition towards an aversion of eerie tales, then Murder House might not be the video game for you. It is a quintessential fifth-generation horror game that necessitates players to utilize tank controls. Following the discovery by a news team of an aged, abandoned home, they opt to infiltrate the premises to report on their story. However, to their horror, the dwelling they have invaded is infested with ghosts, and they become confined. The former abode of the deceased serial killer, Anthony Smith, is restless, and he is not willing to rest in peace. Since Murder House is a retro game, there are no automatic save functions. To preserve their progress, gamers must rely on limited pencils, a feature that was primarily developed for console gamers on PS1. If you are curious to learn which individuals survive and which do not, be forewarned that a night full of terror awaits you. And you might want to keep the lights on. 5. Dead by Daylight. Dead by Daylight is a game of horror that encompasses graphic violence, bloodshed, and mature content. It features a multiplayer format where one participant assumes the role of a savage serial killer while the others attempt to flee and survive. The advantage of the survivors lies in their ability to play in the third person, allowing for ease of learning and situational awareness. The killer, on the other hand, operates in a first-person perspective, thus requiring a diligent search for victims. Players can either collaborate and escape or be selfish and face the prospect of dying alone, which, combined with the ever-present fear of the unknown and the presence of lethal killers, makes for a terrifying experience. The unsettling atmosphere, the creepy environments, and the well-curated music, in addition to the already exceptional horror game, enhance the experience. This game is available for both PC and console players. It is not recommended to play the game in the dark, despite its multiplayer format. Caution should be exercised. 4. Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Amnesia: The Dark Descent, a horror video game created by frictional gamers in the late 2000s, gained popularity for its exceptional emphasis on psychological horror and puzzle solving. However, it was considered unplayable by most due to its peculiar nature. The game lacks any combat, so players must find alternative means of survival, amplifying the game's intensity. While jump scares are often considered the lowest form of horror, The Dark Descent does not rely on this method but rather focuses on creating a sense of powerlessness and despair in a bleak environment. The game follows the story of Daniel, a man battling both his personal demons and the invading monsters in his world. With amnesia affecting his memory, Daniel is trapped in a pitch-black house with only a lamp to guide him. One must consider carefully before delving into the darkness alongside Daniel without a source of illumination. 3. The Evil Within. The Evil Within is a survival horror video game that was created by Tango Gameworks and published by Bethesda Softworks. This game is not for the faint of heart, as its terrifying creature designs make it an incredibly frightening experience. Drawing inspiration from Silent Hill and Resident Evil, The Evil Within employs jump scare characters to keep players on edge. In order to survive, players must scavenge for items in various chapters. The better you perform, the greater your chances of discovering safe havens and upgrading your arsenal. Although The Evil Within is available on both PC and console platforms, its intense gameplay and graphic content may prove too much for those with weak stomachs. It is highly advised against playing in the dark. 2. Remothered, Tormented Fathers. Remothered, Tormented Fathers is an exceptionally realistic survival horror video game that relies heavily on psychology to induce fear in its players. Its narrative is populated by a cast of heroes and villains, making it difficult to discern between the forces of good and evil. The plot is riddled with unexpected turns that create tension and anxiety, resulting in an almost overwhelming sense of dread. The game's story follows Rosemary Reed, a middle-aged woman who visits the home of Richard Felton to investigate a crime. At first, Rosemary is warmly greeted by Gloria, a woman hired to care for Richard. However, as events unfold, it becomes clear that Gloria's intentions are far from benign. Surviving in this game requires a significant amount of psychological preparation and stamina. Remothered's film-like cutscenes, superb audio, and well-crafted soundtrack contribute to its highly unsettling atmosphere. The game is available for both PC and console, and can be played during the day for a slightly less intense experience. 1. Resident Evil 7, Biohazard. Resident Evil, the progenitor of horror video games, looms large over the genre and cannot be ignored. While prior iterations of the game were equally laudable, Resident Evil 7, Biohazard has taken the world by storm, reigning supreme atop charts for nearly half a decade since its 2017 release. Let there be no mistake, this version of the game is a true fright fest. Its single-player mode is set amidst the rural expanses of modern-day America, offering players all the tried-and-true thrills of its predecessors and then some. It's a game of pure survival, only the most cunning and courageous will endure. Fans of the game will attest to the game's atmosphere being the most potent they've ever encountered. To put it bluntly, embarking on a game of Resident Evil 7 is done at one's own peril, and certainly not for the faint of heart. Playing in the dark is simply not advised.